Hey guys, welcome to the first part of the Back to School story special. I just wanted to come in here really quick before we get started and let you know that there are currently 3 shirt designs available on missreaper.com/shop. So even if you're not looking forward to going back to class, at least you'll have something cool to wear. Alright, let's get into the stories. One day when I was in elementary school, 3rd or 4th grade I think, I was awoken by my mom rushing around the house. She had overslept, and since she always woke me up in the morning, this meant that I too had overslept, and now there was just no way I was going to be ready for school early enough to get on the bus. If I recall correctly, school started at 8 a.m., and my bus pickup time was 7 a.m. It was already around 6:40 or something, and I was still in my pajamas and hadn't had breakfast. My mom decided that it would be best just to tell the bus driver to go on ahead, and she would drive me to school instead, which gave me plenty of time to get ready. I was sitting there at the dining table, eating breakfast in my PJs, when suddenly we heard the bus pull up about 10 minutes earlier than usual. My mom peeked her head out of the door into the foggy morning and waved the bus on. She closed the door and came back inside, but the bus didn't pull away. There was a knock at the door, and Mom opened it to find a man in a bus driver uniform. He explained that he was a substitute driver, and that my regular driver had called in sick. He said he knew he was a few minutes early, but he just wanted to get an early start on the route since he didn't know it well. My mom replied that she was just going to take me to school since we woke up late. He got visibly upset and said that he could just wait a few minutes since he was already running ahead of schedule. My mom replied that no, I wouldn't be ready to go in a few minutes, and insisted that he just went on ahead. He seemed to get angry about this, but eventually turned around and got back in the bus and left. I returned to eating my breakfast, still not wearing my school clothes. At 7 a.m. sharp, another bus pulled up to my house. Thinking this was weird, my mom went outside to talk to the driver. She came back inside looking terrified, but didn't say much of anything besides telling me to finish getting ready for school. I had no idea what happened at the time, but Mom ended up sharing it a few years later. When she went to the second bus, she found that it was being operated by my regular bus driver, and that it was full of all the other kids that were usually on the route. The other bus, on the other hand, had been empty. Mom asked the bus driver about his substitute and how she thought he was sick. "I never called in sick. There's no substitute driver on my route," he explained. He immediately called dispatch in a panic and told my mom to go inside and call the police. She must have done this without me noticing because I had no idea until she told me this story recently. There was absolutely no one else that should have been driving that route that day. Whoever this was, I figure they were most likely a kidnapper who had somehow figured out where I lived and targeted me. I never heard anything about this again, not even whether anyone else ended up getting picked up by the mysterious bus. But chances are, if I had gotten on that bus, I never would have made it to school or back home. Even worse is knowing that if my mom hadn't overslept, I probably would have gotten right on that bus without a second thought. I've been staying at the dorms on campus for over 2 years now. The building I'm in has a small library and a lounge with sofas and a treadmill. Every grade has a different exam schedule, so sometimes during finals, the building felt fairly empty since the other years had already started vacation. Angela was a senior when I was a freshman. I didn't know anything about her, but I would see her around a lot, and she would occasionally say hi. Towards the end of my freshman year, I started running into her more than usual. This was around the time that the dorm started to feel empty. One day while I was waiting for my food at the cafeteria, Angela walked over and struck up a conversation. She asked me my name, what year I was, where I was from, and other small talk questions. I answered her questions politely and then went about my day. The next morning, I was waiting for my breakfast when I saw her again. She came up to me and asked me the same exact question she had asked the day before. Again, I answered and left. I saw her again the following 3 days, each time in the cafeteria, and each time she continued to ask me the exact same set of questions. I started to wonder if something was wrong with her at that point. I kept spotting her around various areas in the dorm, but she would mostly hang out around the library. The hallway outside the library was pretty long and empty, and I would frequently see her walking up and down the halls just talking to herself. Things got even weirder once sophomore year came around. My friends and I had started discussing our encounters with Angela because we were all getting pretty creeped out. I study in the library pretty often, and I would always see her randomly walk in, look around, and then leave. People would often report stolen items after leaving things in the library during quick breaks, and we came to the conclusion that it was most likely Angela, since she was there during random hours throughout the day. One time, a girl got her pencil case stolen, with a few important valuables stashed in it, and was asking us if we had seen it. We hadn't, but 2 days later, when the girl was asking around again, we heard Angela respond by naming off all the items that were in that pencil case. As time went on, she seemed to get weirder and weirder. One day I heard someone who sounded like a man talking in the hallway, even though our dorms are strictly for girls only. After a while of hearing the voice, I poked my head out into the hallway to see Angela walking up and down the hall, talking to herself in an artificially deepened voice, and then changing back to her regular feminine voice, as if she was speaking to herself as two different people. That was probably the strangest thing I had witnessed from her at the time. A couple weeks later, I was sitting in the dining area, which is decorated with multiple mirrors on the walls. Angela was walking around talking to herself as usual, and eventually stopped in front of one of the mirrors. Turning towards it, she smiled widely and laughed maniacally. I was a little afraid of what she might do next, so I immediately got up and ran out of there before she spotted me. She's followed me a few times from the library, so I knew she knew where my room was, and part of me was afraid she might try and hurt me. I tried writing these thoughts off, though, thinking that she must have some sort of mental or emotional issues that she wasn't getting treatment for. It wasn't long after I had reassured myself that Angela was harmless when I was asleep in my room one night with my door unlocked. Suddenly, the door flew open, and I could see the silhouette of a girl in the doorway, looking around my room quickly before running out and slamming the door behind her. This scared the shit out of me, so it took me a moment to regain composure and check the hallway to see who it was. The hall was empty by the time I got there, but I still believed that it had to have been Angela. Luckily, she ended up graduating at the end of the year, so I had high hopes that I wouldn't run into her again. One day at the start of my junior year, I was sitting in the library when I noticed a girl walk in wearing a hoodie that covered most of her face. She walked to the back of the library, touching each desk she passed. I had a memory of Angela cross my mind since I recalled some similar behaviors from her when I finally heard the girl mumbling to herself. It was undeniable that this was Angela's voice I was hearing. My heart dropped. Why was she back on campus? I was at the ceremony the year before, so I knew she had graduated and had no reason to be there. Sure enough, I started seeing her around campus frequently all over again, except now she had a habit of keeping her face mostly covered. I caught her staring at me and talking to herself while I was running on the treadmill one day, and once she even sat across from me in the library, uncomfortably close and silent for a full 5 minutes. She ended up following me back to my room after that, walking quickly behind me as I hurried to lock myself in my room before she could catch up. I know she's not specifically targeting me, but after discussing with a few people, it doesn't seem like she goes to quite this extent with anyone else. Unfortunately, the administration at our school is pretty hands-off and careless, so anytime someone has tried to report her behavior, the school has never done anything about it. I feel like I can't go anywhere around campus without running into her and having some sort of awful experience because of her. I made it a habit to keep my door locked at night because of how paranoid she makes me, but even still, I've seen my door handle turn on some occasions, and I have no doubt that it's her again. The more that I experience this type of behavior from her, the less I can convince myself that she's truly harmless. A friend of mine was murdered during our sophomore year of high school. I remember becoming friends with her during our freshman year when she sat in front of me. Her name was Deanna Wright. We were from the same neighborhood and both worked at pizza shops a few blocks away. One night, after we had been friends for a while, she texted me asking if I wanted to do anything. I remember that this was before anyone had unlimited cell phone plans, and I was using one of those huge brick Nokia phones where you had to pay for every text you opened. Seeing that her next message was on the longer side, I decided to give her a call to save my minutes. She told me she had gotten in a fight with her mom and just wanted to go out and smoke some weed. I told her I had work and wouldn't be out until we finished closing up at 1 a.m. I needed gas money, so I couldn't blow off work, but I told her I could come hang out afterwards if she was still up. She sighed and said okay, but asked me to text her when I was done with work so we could meet up wherever she had found plans to keep her entertained. After I was done with my closing duties around 1:15, I texted her but didn't get a reply. I wasn't too surprised though, figuring she had probably fallen asleep by then. Saturday, I texted her again, but nothing. Sunday, again, no response. Thinking back on our fight with her mom, I thought she might be grounded, especially after sneaking out late on Friday night when her mom was still upset with her. Monday came around, and my school day started with an announcement from my homeroom teacher. Sorry to inform you guys, but Deanna is missing. Her family reported her missing after she went out Friday night and never came home. My stomach dropped, my fingers tingled. I couldn't believe it. I wondered if I was one of the last people who had talked to her before she vanished. It wasn't long before we found out what actually happened. Apparently that night, she ended up hanging out with a guy she knew from the pizza shop she worked at. She was a beautiful girl and had been doing some modeling at the time, so I can only imagine what this guy was thinking. We're not exactly sure what order everything happened in, but that night she was drugged, raped, and strangled to death. Her murderer then decided to cut her body into pieces, put her in a steel drum, and light her on fire. I think about that night over and over again. Should I have just gone out with her anyway? Would that have even made a difference? Or would he have just killed us both? This happened when I was in 7th grade in a small town in Ontario. Me and everyone else in my class was around 12 years old. For the first part of 7th grade, we had a substitute teacher filling in for Mr. C, who was on sick leave. We later found out that this was due to mental health issues. The substitute was great, but left after the winter break when Mr. C was returning. He was kind of a creep from the start. He used to make a lot of little, unsettling remarks that we would let slide, but after a while, it started to escalate. One encounter I recall was during recess, when he tried to get me and Rachel to say different words for penis, and would ask us if we were comfortable saying things like that. As young, self-aware girls, we both decided to tell our parents, and they were pissed. They called the school, and obviously, nothing was done about it. Otherwise, I wouldn't have a story to tell here. Fast forward a few creepy months, Rachel and I were in the gymnasium with the 20 other kids in our class. I remember we were doing the gymnastics portion of our gym program. We were halfway through class when Rachel got up to go to the part of the gym where we would leave our shoes. After a little while, I turned around to look for her, and to my surprise, she was standing across the gym in shock, holding a video camera. At this point, no one else had really noticed, and I hadn't even put two and two together yet, but what happened next made me figure it out pretty damn fast. Mr. C, who had been lounging around the gym not doing much of anything throughout the class, spotted Rachel with the camera. His face turned from completely apathetic to utter horror in a split second. He grabbed a soccer ball from a nearby rack and chucked it across the room at Rachel in front of our entire class. He hit her dead in the side of the face, and she dropped the camera before running out of the room to the office. The rest of our class followed her out into the hallway before Mr. C could do anything else. He grabbed his camera and ran right out of the front doors of the school. I never saw him again. Rachel's parents eventually told my family that they pressed charges and that he was convicted of assault on a minor and intent to harm minors. It turned out he had been taping our class since he had begun teaching us, and he had dozens of tapes of our classes. He would position the cameras in places to capture the most revealing angles of whatever activity we were doing that day. Needless to say, we got a new teacher for the rest of the year, and she was nice enough to let us do whatever we wanted and enjoy ourselves for the remainder of the class. In hindsight, everything about Mr. C seemed menacing in a way. From accidentally walking into our changing rooms to extensive health lessons that always turned to sex. It still makes my skin crawl to think about how I had been filmed as a young girl by this creep without my knowledge for so long.